everyone, and welcome to my channel. My name is Holly.
And I'm Darren.
And today we are doing another Chat With Us video. We are talking about questions to ask your partner, hopefully before marriage, in order to communicate better and to understand each other just a little bit more.
So today we're going to go through a bunch of different questions. We have over 50, and so we're not going to go through every single one, and we'll include them down below. And we got these questions while taking a religious class in college when we were dating, and we went through these questions ourselves, and so it was awesome for us, and we think it would be awesome for you too.
Yeah, and I would, like I said, even go through these questions if you are married or whatnot, because there's some awesome questions on here. And I really think like going through these again, I'd want to ask a lot of these to you again and see how you feel now after, like 4.5 years of being together.
And I think one of the best things about this is there are some difficult questions to ask that don't happen to come up in casual conversation, but they're important things to know about your spouse. And so this kind of gives you an excuse to ask some of those difficult questions.
Exactly. All right, so let's go on to the questions. We kind of have them broken up into different categories. So the first is just about children, because obviously children are very important. The first is, how do you feel about having children? What is your timing on starting a family? How many children have you wanted? If we are unable to have children, how do you feel about adoption?
Yeah, so I think these are some great questions to start out with. Kids and family are really core to a marriage or any relationship long term. And so it's good to know if you're both in sort of the same mindset. Frequently in dramas that we watch, the core problem is whether or not people want to have kids. So this could help solve a lot of their issues if they talked about this beforehand.
Yeah, exactly. All right, so on to the next set. What are your feelings about using birth control? What makes you nervous or anxious regarding intimacy? How do you feel most comfortable expressing your love? How do you feel about pornography? So obviously these questions are very important going into a long-term relationship or a marriage, because intimacy and sex is so critical in a relationship. And you want to really be able to talk to your spouse about it and have it be something that you're very comfortable talking about, because it's going to affect your marriage long-term.
And so while some of these might feel like they fall more under a religious lens, they are good to have a background where if you have differing opinions, regardless of what your opinion is, just as long as you know and can come together on what you think about it together.
Yeah, that's really important, is just like coming together and really understanding what the other's expectation is so that you guys can meet somewhere in the middle.
Okay, so the next set of questions is, what approach is going to be taken to parenting and how will we discipline our children?
Obviously, this isn't as important if you guys don't want kids, but if you do want kids, parenting is going to be a huge part of your everyday lives together. And so it's important to understand what your partner wants to do when it comes to parenting and what you want to do, how you guys want to discipline and teach your kids going forward.
And I think talking about disciplining is really important, because when you come from different backgrounds, you could have a wildly different view about disciplining. And while that might not be as critical for dating, it could cause like a real rift if one person is okay with spanking and the other person isn't.
Yeah, that would be a big deal. Like, you definitely should talk about that before your child gets spanked.
And then the next ones are, what role do our parents play in our marriage, and do you want to live nearby extended family? I think this is really important for our marriage specifically. Holly's the oldest of all of her siblings, and I'm towards the end of my siblings, and we ended up living pretty close to Holly's family. So I think the fact that we had discussed kind of where we wanted to live, how close we were okay being to family, ended up being really important for us.
Yeah, so if extended family is important to you, you don't want to like bug your spouse by going over there, multiple times a week and then being like, I didn't realize that they were like so important. So just telling them before you get married can really help some issues in the future.
Getting away from those smothered type problems.
Yeah. The next questions are you in debt? What are your financial goals? And does it matter to you who will earn most of the income? So we talked about this in one of our last videos about finances and goals and everything like that. So there's a lot of questions, a lot of things that you can talk about when it comes to finances, and finances really are so important in a marriage. You guys can reference back to that last video, and we can, because that's what we talked a lot more about that then.
Yeah, and we didn't specifically address some of the questions here, so I would go over them for sure. Moving on, we have how much do you play video games? Will you keep on playing games after marriage, and how often?
I think video games here is kind of like a placeholder for a lot of things. It's like whatever you spend a lot of time doing, like something that you love that your spouse may not love, like more like a hobby, I guess.
Yeah.
So like video games could be seen to like me as like not that important, but to you very important, and making sure that you get in the time that you need to do it.
Yeah, and I think this could be like working out if one of
Yeah.
the people is really big into going to the gym, but the other spouse isn't going to want to do that. And if that takes up a significant portion of your time and you're not doing it together, it's something to discuss.
These next questions are questions that are hard to bring up in a normal conversation, but they're really important to understand about each other. Do you struggle with depression or insecurity? Is there anything that I should be aware of from your past? Have you ever been abused? So obviously these are a lot deeper questions, but if anything from your past or if there's been abuse that's happened, it's going to affect your current and future self and therefore your partner. And so I think it's really important so that you guys can support each other and help each other through any difficult times that you may have been through, and you can understand each other a lot better.
This makes me think of one of the most recent episodes of This Is Us, slight spoilers. Kate has some things that happens in her past that she didn't bring up with Toby beforehand, and they end up being a little bit difficult, but they're, some severe and heavy topics that might not come up naturally. And sometimes if you're able to talk about them through this list, then that would be like a safe place to share.
Yeah, exactly. And it brings it up in such like a more natural way, because you're already discussing these things and already talking about it. And therefore you don't have to like have a, crazy revelation like the show where you find out something big happened and you had no idea for a few years.
How much do you want to travel, and what do you consider quality time together? I think this kind of falls under love languages, and what are the hobbies that you want to have together?
Yeah, I think that for some couples, like traveling is really, really important to them, and making sure like it kind of goes back into finances too, that you are saving and working in traveling and making sure you make the time for that within your marriage.
I might have looked creepy in that take.
It's okay. Next questions. Are you comfortable having separate and independent friendships? Do you struggle with jealousy? Obviously, these are important because as a couple, it's hard to find good couple friends, right? My gosh, we know the struggle. If you're okay having separate friends, I think that's great, but it is important to have like couple friends, I think.
It's important to have couple friends, but also just be clear on what friendships you're wanting to maintain after you get married, especially if it's somebody from the opposite sex. And if that is going to continue into your marriage. What was your childhood like? Describe your high school experience. What have you learned from dating? And who is your most significant relationship with? I think these ones are probably a little bit easier to talk about and bring up, but it's important to know, what your background is, if you had good experiences in school, what your experiences with dating were like, and who's the most important people in your life currently.
Like you said, I feel like things are going to come up more naturally, but it still is important to talk about and to understand. I think it's great to understand like their high school experience too, and be able to apply that to who they are now. These next questions are about how much you would want to spend on your engagement ring, your honeymoon, and your wedding. And just really understanding how important those things are to you. Like, is it important for you to have like a really big engagement ring with a real diamond versus a fake diamond? Or is it important to spend more money on a honeymoon, to travel outside of the US, or stay in the state that you're in?
I think it would also be important to talk about how funding for your wedding is going to come. There's differences in background and culture, especially with who is going to be paying for the wedding. So knowing about that and clearly communicating early is going to help you have a really happy and successful wedding.
Yeah, and it just is like really about managing expectations. Like if I was like in my head like, oh my gosh, I'm so excited for this huge ring that he's gonna propose with, and like, but I never communicated that to you, and you end up with a ring that I wasn't expecting, or like a lot smaller, whatever, then it would be disappointing, but if you are able to communicate beforehand and say, oh, this is what I'm expecting, and if you say, well, this is how much money I have, you can really like come to terms with it and understand and like, I don't know, and just start your marriage off on a good foot.
Yeah, because I think some people would be willing to go into debt for an engagement ring or for their wedding / honeymoon, and a lot of people wouldn't be. So just knowing where you're at.
Yeah.
These next ones talk about communications. These next ones talk about how you communicate, what your strengths and weaknesses are, and sort of how you fight. You're going to have experiences with all of these while dating, but having a clear understanding of what people are going to do when they feel threatened or when they're hurt or sad is really important. If people need space and time and then are fine to get over it, if you need to discuss it that day, if you're okay discussing it, within a certain time frame, that type of thing.
Yeah, and I think you would, like, if you've been dating for a long time, you would totally get this just from your experience. But I think it's important for the person who is explaining it, like, how do I fight? And just so that they realize like where they're coming from, like you can experience it, but it's different when you are saying it in your own words to somebody else. So I think actually talking about it is important besides just experiencing it.
Yeah, and I think while talking about it, you might bring up the background to your life and why you are the way you are with this, because, maybe it was because of your parents' relationship or a past relationship that you've had. So that would be a good opportunity to bring those things up. And same thing goes for what your strengths and weaknesses are in communication. You might have experienced those things, but having the individual vocalize where they think they're strong and weak can just bring you together.
Yeah, well, and I think too that's great because it's kind of like awkward to be like, oh, I think your weaknesses in communication is this. Like that's like a little bit like attacking.
Aggressive,
Yeah. Whereas if you are coming from yourself and be like, my weaknesses are this, I think it's way easier for you to be like, oh, I've seen that, and and you can talk about it from there.
It's a safe space.
Yeah, it's more of a safe space, and it's not like me being like, you suck at this and you suck at this, and it's just easier. Next questions are, what are your greatest strengths and what are your greatest weaknesses? I think that after going through maybe some of like the more negative things, like things that are hard to talk about, you can talk about what you think their greatest strengths are, and you yourself can bring up your great strengths, because I think it's awesome and important for you to understand and come up with yourself what your strengths are and also your weaknesses.
The last question is, what do you love about me the most? And I think this is a good thing to end on, and you could even talk about this throughout the questions if you're not doing it all in one sitting. I wouldn't recommend that, by the way. I'd probably break this up over a couple weeks.
It's a lot of questions.
Yeah, and it goes into a lot of discussion, but I would say always to end the conversation on something positive, something like this, that you are coming together, and even if there's difficult conversations to have, that you're ending it on a positive note.
Yeah, I think it's important to, oftentimes say what you love about the person. Just like you were saying, I think it's really important to end on a positive note. And
she can't do it. So like we said, it's good to end on a positive note. So one of the things I love most about Holly is that she's really good at communicating, because we've talked through all these questions and sometimes there's difficult topics to bring up, but she's always really good about communicating her feelings in a way that I know that she loves me, even if it's a difficult conversation and something that she might be upset about.
Oh, thank you. Something I love about Darren is that he is a great father to our 2 little boys, and I can tell how much that he loves them, and he makes sure that he spends time with them and takes time out of his day and his work day especially to spend time with them and also to help me out. He just loves us all, and I love that.
Yeah, contrary to what it might appear in some day in the life of videos, I am present in our family.
He is very present in my family, and I love it. Anyway, so I hope that you guys enjoyed these questions. I hope that you're able to talk about them with your partner, especially if you guys are engaged and planning on getting married, and just talk about each other and talk about where you are in your relationship and in your communication.
Yeah. So down below, we're going to include these questions. We'll include 2 different versions. One from the class that we took and questions about the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and another one that doesn't have as many religious questions, but religion is a good thing to discuss.
Oh yeah, that's super important. I feel like that actually isn't one of the questions on here because it was like from our religious class. But religion is important, discussing how important religion is to you and how you want to apply that to your family. All right, so we will link these questions down below for you guys. And if you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe. And we are excited to keep doing these chat with us. I think it's a lot of fun to have Darren on here and be able to just talk like we would talk with our family members.
Yeah, so let us know if there are any other topics you'd like us to discuss. We're thinking about going through some parenting styles, love languages, those type of things.
Yeah. All right, thank you guys so much for watching, and we hope you all have a great day. Bye.
Bye.